The silence of deep space shattered as alarms screamed across the bridge of the Galactic Council Station Harmony. Ambassador Velkari's 6 eyes widened as data streams flooded the main display. Her delicate antennae trembled with each new report that arrived. Confirmed hostile contact in sectors 7 through 12, the Zalathi communications officer reported, his voice crackling with fear. The Devourers have returned. Velkari felt her heart sink. The Devourers were a nightmare from ancient history, a swarm species that consumed entire star systems, leaving nothing but empty void in their wake. They had vanished thousands of years ago, and most species had hoped they were gone forever. "How many ships?" she asked, though she dreaded the answer. "Initial scans show over 10,000 vessels, Ambassador. More emerging from subspace every minute." The conference room doors hissed open as representatives from dozens of species rushed in. The Altarian delegates' feathers stood on end. The Korvax ambassador's usually calm blue skin had turned pale gray, and even the mighty Thraxians looked shaken. "We must evacuate immediately," the Zalathi Prime Minister declared. "Our combined fleets number less than 3,000 ships. We cannot stand against such numbers." "Evacuation is impossible," the tactical advisor interrupted. "The Devourers have already cut off all major hyperlane routes. They're moving faster than our models predicted." Velkari studied the holographic display showing the enemy advance. The Devourers moved like a plague across the star map, their biomechanical ships consuming asteroids, moons, anything with raw materials to fuel their endless hunger. Already, 3 frontier colonies had gone dark. "What about the defense platforms?" someone asked. "Overwhelmed in minutes. The Devourers adapt to our weapons faster than we can recalibrate." Despair settled over the room like a shroud. The Galactic Council represented the pinnacle of civilized species, yet all their technology, all their advancement meant nothing against this ancient threat. "There is one option," Velkari said quietly. The room turned to her. She could feel their desperate hope and their immediate fear when they realized what she meant. "No," the Altarian delegate said immediately. "We cannot involve them. They're too dangerous, too unpredictable." "The humans are Deathworlders," the Korvax ambassador added. "Their very presence violates half our safety protocols. Their planet's gravity alone would crush most of us." Velkari understood their fear. Humanity had only been discovered 50 years ago, and the first contact reports had been terrifying. A species that evolved on a world where the rain could be acid, where massive predators hunted in packs, where the weather itself could kill in 100 different ways. Humans breathed a mixture of gases that was toxic to 60% of known species. They consumed liquids that would dissolve Zalathi's stomach lining. Their military tactics were considered so extreme that viewing human historical war documentation required psychological preparation. "The humans have stayed within their borders," the Thraxian general rumbled. "They trade peacefully. Perhaps the stories are exaggerated." "Exaggerated?" The Altarian's voice rose to a shriek. "I've seen the footage from their world. They jump from flying vehicles for entertainment. They poison themselves with fermented drinks for pleasure. Their children play games that would be lethal combat training on any civilized world." Another alarm sounded. The Devourers had taken 3 more systems. "We're running out of time," Velkari said. "Yes, the humans are dangerous. Yes, they're unpredictable. But they're also the only species the Devourers have never encountered. The only ones who might think differently enough to find a solution." "And if they turn on us afterward?" the Korvax asked. "Then we die later, instead of now," Velkari replied bluntly. "At least with the humans, we have a chance." The vote was close, but desperation won. With trembling tentacles, Velkari initiated the quantum communicator, sending a message to the quarantine zone around Sol system. The response came faster than expected. The human face that appeared on screen was weathered and scarred, with Predator's eyes that seemed to look through Valkyrie rather than at her. Admiral Chen of the Terran Defense Force. "Ambassador Valkyrie," the human said. "We've been monitoring the situation. The Devourers, correct?" "Yes, Admiral. The Galactic Council formally requests Earth's assistance. We understand this is unprecedented, but how long do we have?" Chen interrupted. Valkyrie blinked all 6 eyes in surprise. "At current rate of advance, perhaps 30 standard days before they reach the core worlds. Send us everything. Technical specifications, biological data, tactical analyses, everything you have on these Devourers." "Admiral, I must warn you, the Devourers number in the millions. They adapt to weapons, consume entire worlds, and have never been stopped. Every species that has faced them has been..." "Ambassador." Chen's scarred face split into what humans called a smile. It displayed far too many teeth. "You're talking to a species that evolved on a planet that tries to kill us daily. We've been preparing for something like this our whole existence." The connection ended. Around the conference table, dozens of species sat in stunned silence. "What have we done?" the Altarian whispered. Within hours, human fleets began emerging from the Sol system. The watching council members gasped. They had expected perhaps a few hundred ships, maybe 1,000 if the humans had been building in secret. Instead, over 5,000 vessels of impossible design poured into space. Ships that looked wrong to civilized eyes, built with sharp angles and aggressive lines, bristling with weapons that violated several treaties humanity had never signed. But it wasn't the ships that truly terrified the observers. It was the broadcasts. Human communication channels exploded with activity, not encrypted military codes, but open transmissions. Music that pounded with primitive rhythms. Voices raised in languages the translators struggled with, and imagery that made hardened diplomats look away. "Are they celebrating?" the Korvax asked in disbelief. On the screens, human soldiers performed pre-battle rituals. Some painted their faces with designs that triggered primal fear responses in every watching species. Others sharpened blades, actual metal blades, while singing songs about death and glory. The humans moved with a coordinated chaos that defied military doctrine, yet somehow worked. Admiral Chen's voice cut across all channels. "Attention all human forces. The call has been answered. For too long we've held back, played nice, pretended to be something we're not. But now they need us to be what we truly are." A pause. "Deathworlders." The human fleets began to move, not in the careful formations the Council used, but in fluid pack movements that reminded Valkyrie uncomfortably of the Predator documentaries from Earth. Wolves, she remembered. They moved like wolves. "Admiral Chen is hailing us," the communications officer reported. Chen appeared on screen again, now wearing armor that looked like it was designed to intimidate as much as protect. "Ambassador, pull your fleets back to the core worlds. Form a defensive line, but do not engage." "Admiral, surely coordinated tactics would be..." "With respect, Ambassador, your people fight wars. Humans wage them. There's a difference you're about to see." "I don't understand." Chen's grin widened. "Your species evolved despite your environments. Humans evolved because of ours. Every advancement we've made came from conflict. With nature, with predators, with ourselves. We don't just survive existential threats, Ambassador. We thrive on them." The connection ended again. On the tactical display, human fleets raced toward the advancing devourer swarm at speeds that should have been suicidal. "They'll be slaughtered," the Thraxian general muttered. Valkyrie wasn't so sure. She had studied humans more than most, read their history with a mixture of horror and fascination. These were a people who had split the atom before achieving sustainable spaceflight. who had weaponized diseases before discovering their cures, who had looked at their hostile world and instead of seeking harmony, had conquered it. The first contact between human forces and the Devourers was about to begin. The Council held its collective breath, watching tactical displays from safe distances. Energy spikes detected from human vessels, a technician reported. They're by the void. What are those readings? The human ships had begun deploying weapons that the Council's computers couldn't classify, not because they were advanced, but because they were wrong. Weapons that turned space itself into a hazard, devices that violated the laws of physics in ways that made scientists weep. Incoming transmission from the lead Devourer hive, the communications officer announced. This was unprecedented. The Devourers had never communicated before. The signal resolved into patterns that the universal translator struggled with. When it finally managed to parse the meaning, the message was simple. What are you? From the human fleet, Admiral Chen's response broadcast on all frequencies. We're humans. We're the species that looked at our death world and made it our home. We're the ones who turned killing into an art form and survival into a science. We're what happens when evolution decides to create something that refuses to die. A pause. We're your worst nightmare, given form and purpose. The battle was about to begin. Around the council chambers, representatives of 100 civilized species watched in terrified awe as humanity prepared to show the galaxy why Earth was classified as a death world, and why its children were so much worse. The Devourers had consumed countless civilizations, faced technologies beyond imagination, adapted to every weapon and strategy they encountered. They had been the ultimate predator for millennia. They had never faced humans. As the two forces closed to engagement range, Valkyrie found herself thinking of an old Earth phrase she had read once. Beware the fury of a patient man. Humanity had been patient for 50 years, playing by the Council's rules, restraining their nature. That patience had just ended. Space itself seemed to hold its breath as Deathworlders and Devourers raced toward collision. The galaxy was about to learn what happened when humanity answered the call to war. And may the void have mercy on them all. The first human ship to engage the Devourers was the TDS Persistence, a destroyer that by Council standards should have kept its distance and fired from maximum range. Instead, it accelerated directly into the swarm. "Are they insane?" the Altarian delegate shrieked. "That's suicide!" On the tactical display, the Persistence vanished into a cloud of Devourer bioships. For a moment, nothing happened. Then space itself seemed to scream. The human vessel detonated something inside the swarm. Not a conventional weapon, but something that made the watching scientists recoil. The explosion didn't just destroy Devourer ships, it corrupted them. Biomechanical vessels twisted and writhed as their own organic components turned against them. "Chemical weapons," the Korvax ambassador whispered. "They're using chemical weapons." "Biological," Valkyrie corrected, reading the sensor data with growing horror and fascination. "They've somehow created a virus that attacks the Devourer's bio-neural networks." The Persistence emerged from the dying swarm, its hull scarred but intact. More human ships followed its example, diving into Devourer formations with weapons that defied conventional warfare. Admiral Chen's face appeared on a priority channel. "Ambassador, I need you to relay something to your scientists. The Devourers adapt to energy weapons and conventional attacks because they follow patterns, so we're not using patterns." "What are you using?" Valkyrie asked, though she dreaded the answer. "Chaos." The human battle plan, if it could be called that, unfolded across the sector. Where Council fleets would have formed defensive lines and coordinated fire patterns, humans attacked in seemingly random groups. Ships would strike, retreat, circle back, strike again. No two attacks were the same. One human cruiser, the TDS relentless, broadcast classical music while firing projectiles filled with what the computers identified as a modified strain of Earth bacteria. The bacteria consumed the organic components of devourer ships, spreading from vessel to vessel faster than they could adapt. Another group of human ships used weapons that simply shouldn't exist. Gravity hammers that compressed space, temporal mines that aged sections of enemy ships thousands of years in seconds, something called a cascade resonator that made devourer vessels shake themselves apart at a molecular level. How? The Thraxian general demanded. How do they have such weapons? They've been preparing, Velkari realized. For 50 years, they've been watching us, learning our limits, our rules, and they've been building weapons we would never conceive of because we would never need them. The Devourers tried to adapt. They always adapted, but human tactics shifted faster than evolution could follow. When the swarm developed immunity to one biological weapon, humans deployed a different one. When they adapted to projectile weapons, humans switched to energy beams. When they shielded against energy, humans used weapons that bypassed shields entirely. And through it all, the humans sang. Their communication channels remained open, flooding space with battle hymns, war cries, and something they called heavy metal. The psychological warfare was as effective as their physical weapons. Several council species had to mute the audio feeds to prevent their crews from panicking. 3 hours into the battle, the impossible happened. The Devourers began to retreat. "They're pulling back," a sensor tech reported, disbelief clear in their voice. "The Devourers are actually retreating." But the humans didn't let them go. "No warnings. No survivors," Admiral Chen commanded across the fleet. "They came to consume. We came to exterminate." Human ships pursued the fleeing Devourers with predatory efficiency. Where Council doctrine would have dictated allowing an enemy to retreat, humans pressed their advantage. Ships that had pretended to be damaged suddenly came alive, cutting off escape routes. Fighters that had seemed randomly scattered formed into hunting packs, herding Devourer vessels into kill zones. The TDS vengeance demonstrated why humans had earned their Deathworld classification. When its conventional weapons ran low, the crew did something no civilized species would consider. They rammed their ship directly into a Devourer command node, detonating their reactor core on impact. "They killed themselves to destroy the enemy," the Korvax said in shock. "No," Velkari corrected, watching the sensor data. "Look. Escape pods launched just before impact. They timed it perfectly." Human escape pods were recovered by other vessels, their occupants returning to battle within hours. The message was clear. Humans would sacrifice their ships, their resources, even their lives if it meant victory. But it was the arrival of Earth's special forces that truly showed the galaxy what Deathworlders could do. Ships designated as marine dropships began boarding Devourer vessels. The Council had always considered boarding actions impossible against the Devourers. Their ships were filled with toxic atmospheres, crawling with defensive organisms, and had no compatible life support. Humans didn't care. Marine squads in powered armor that looked more like personal tanks stormed through Devourer ships. They carried weapons that would be considered war crimes on any Council world. Flamethrowers that burned even in the vacuum of space. Sonic disruptors that liquefied organic matter. Something called a molecular blade that cut through anything it touched. The helmet camera feeds were quickly classified. What the human Marines did inside those ships was too disturbing for most species to witness. They didn't just kill, they terrorized, moving through corridors filled with toxic gas and defensive organisms, hunting the Devourers in their own environment. "They're enjoying this," someone whispered in horror. It was true. The human communication channels were filled with laughter, challenges between squads for who could clear ships faster, soldiers comparing kill counts like it was a game. One Marine sergeant, asked by a reporter how they could board ships with atmospheres toxic enough to melt most environmental suits, had laughed. Toxic? Sure. But you should try surviving in Australia. Now that's toxic. The turning point came when the humans deployed their ultimate weapon. Not a bomb or a virus, but something far worse. Human creativity unleashed without restrictions. A group of human scientists, watching the battle from a research vessel, noticed patterns in how the Devourers communicated. Within hours, they had cracked the bio-neural frequency the swarm used to coordinate. "What are they doing?" Valkyrie asked as human ships began broadcasting on that frequency. The answer became horrifyingly clear. Humans were sending corrupted data directly into the Devourer hive mind. Not just computer viruses, but concepts and ideas that the collective consciousness couldn't process. Images of things that shouldn't exist. Mathematical paradoxes. Philosophical questions with no answers. They were driving the hive mind insane. Devourer ships began attacking each other, their coordination shattered. Some flew in circles, others simply shut down, their bio-neural networks overloaded with contradictory information. "They're using mimetic weapons," a council scientist said in awe. "Weaponized ideas. How do you even defend against that?" You didn't. That was the point. As the battle raged, Valkyrie began to understand something fundamental. The council species had always focused on defense, on survival, on maintaining civilization. They built weapons to protect. Humans built weapons to destroy. A devourer superhive larger than some moons emerged from subspace. It was a last, desperate attempt to overwhelm human forces with sheer size and power. The bioship could consume entire fleets, had armor thick enough to shrug off most weapons, and carried millions of warrior drones. Admiral Chen's response was broadcast across all channels. Finally, a real challenge. All ships implement Protocol Omega. Human vessels began moving in a pattern that made no tactical sense. Ships scattered across the system suddenly accelerated toward seemingly empty points in space. The Council watched in confusion as humans appeared to abandon favorable positions. Then space itself cracked. The human ships hadn't been moving randomly. They had been placing gravitational charges at precise coordinates. When detonated simultaneously, they created an artificial black hole directly in the superhive's path. "That's impossible," the Thraxian general said flatly. "The energy requirements alone—" "They've been draining stars," Valkyrie interrupted, reading the sensor data. "Small stars, but still. They've been storing stellar energy for this exact purpose." The superhive tried to escape, but human ships herded it toward the growing gravitational anomaly. Smaller vessels sacrificed themselves to damage the hive's engines, ensuring it couldn't flee. As the massive bioship was pulled toward the black hole, Admiral Chen opened a channel to it. "You asked what we are. We're the species that looked at the fundamental forces of the universe and thought, how can we weaponize this? We're the ones who split atoms for power and then realized we could split them for war." The superhive's final transmission was a single concept that the translators struggled with. The closest approximation was, why? Chen's answer was humanity distilled to its essence. Because we can. The artificial black hole consumed the superhive in minutes. Around it, the remaining devourer forces scattered, their coordination completely broken. Human ships pursued relentlessly, turning retreat into rout. In 12 hours, humanity had done what the combined council fleets couldn't do in millennia. They had broken the Devourers. But they weren't done. "Admiral Chen!" Valkyrie called out as reports flooded in of human ships pursuing fleeing Devourers across multiple systems. "The enemy is retreating. Surely now we can discuss terms." "Terms?" Chen's scarred face showed genuine confusion. "Ambassador, they came to commit genocide. There are no terms. There is only ending the threat." "But they're beaten." Beaten isn't eliminated. They'll regroup, rebuild, come back in 1,000 years when we've grown complacent. No. His expression hardened. We're going to find every hive, every seed ship, every last trace of their species, and we're going to burn it all. The council chambers erupted in protests. This went against every civilized principle of warfare. You didn't pursue a beaten enemy to extinction. You showed mercy. Mercy? Chen's laugh was cold. Ambassador, on Earth, showing mercy to a predator just means it comes back to eat your children. We learned that lesson before we could walk upright. Human fleets spread across the galaxy like antibodies responding to infection. They developed new tracking methods to find hidden devourer bases. They recruited formerly consumed species who wanted revenge. They turned the hunt for the devourers into a crusade, and they shared their weapons. "You're giving us the virus codes?" the Korvax ambassador asked in shock as human data packets arrived at council stations. "And the gravity hammer specifications," Chen confirmed. "And the chemical weapon formulas. Everything we used." "Why?" "Because," Chen said simply, "the next threat might come when we're not around. You need to be ready. You need to be willing to do what must be done." As human ships continued their relentless pursuit of the fleeing devourers, Valkyrie found herself studying the battle data again and again. Everything about human tactics violated conventional military wisdom, yet it had worked perfectly. They had turned warfare into chaos and chaos into victory. The Altarian delegate approached her, feathers still ruffled with distress. "What have we unleashed, Ambassador?" Valkyrie watched the tactical display showing human ships spreading across the galaxy, hunting devourers with predatory efficiency. "We didn't unleash anything. We simply gave them permission to stop pretending they were something they're not." "And what are they?" She thought of Earth, that impossible death world where life had evolved, not despite the danger, but because of it, where every creature was locked in eternal competition for survival, where cooperation existed only because it made the participating groups better killers. "They're survivors," she said finally, "the ultimate survivors, and they'll make sure we survive too, whether we like their methods or not." The second phase of what humans were already calling the Devourer War was beginning. Council species watched in mixed awe and horror as humanity showed the galaxy what total war looked like. No warnings, no survivors, no mercy. Just Deathworlders doing what Deathworlders did best, making sure their enemies became extinct before they could return the favor. 6 months after the first engagement, the galaxy had changed forever. Human fleets moved through space like apex predators, methodically hunting down every last trace of the devourers. What the Council had expected to be a war had become an extermination. Valkyrie stood on the observation deck of the human dreadnought TDS extinction event, a name that would have seemed overdramatic before she'd seen it in action. Admiral Chen stood beside her, pointing to a holographic display showing the latest tactical data. "There," he said, highlighting a sector near the galactic rim. "Deep space scans found gravitational anomalies consistent with devourer hibernation pods, probably been dormant for thousands of years." "And you're going to destroy them," Valkyrie said. It wasn't a question anymore. "Every last one. Can't risk them waking up in another millennium when everyone's forgotten how to fight them." The extinction event and its battle group jumped to the target sector. Valkyrie watched human efficiency in action. They didn't just destroy the hibernation pods, they analyzed them first, extracting data about devourer biology, technology, and history, knowledge that could be used to ensure nothing like them ever rose again. "Your species terrifies me," Valkyrie admitted, as another cluster of ancient pods was vaporized. Chen nodded. "Good. Terror keeps you alive. Complacency gets you eaten." The human approach to warfare had proven devastatingly effective. While Council species had always fought defensively, trying to preserve their civilizations, humans fought offensively, focusing solely on destroying the enemy. They had turned the entire galaxy into a hunting ground, but it was what happened next that truly showed the Council what humanity was capable of. A distress signal reached the extinction event from a remote system. Not a devourer signal, but from a species calling themselves the Vec. They had been in hibernation for millennia, fleeing from the devourers, and had just awakened to find human ships in their system. "Please," the Vec representative pleaded over communications. "We mean no harm. We're just refugees. We hid when the devourers came for our worlds." The bridge crew looked to Admiral Chen. By Council standards, these were innocents deserving of protection. The Vec had done nothing wrong except survive. "Scan their ships," Chen ordered. The results came back quickly. Vec vessels had biological components similar to devourer technology. Further analysis showed genetic markers indicating the Vec had been experimenting with devourer biotechnology before going into hibernation. "They were trying to become like the devourers," the science officer reported. "Probably thought it was the only way to survive." Chen's expression didn't change. "Target all Vec vessels. Fire when ready." "Admiral," Velkari protested, "they're not devourers. They're victims." "They're infected," Chen replied coldly, compromised. "In 1,000 years, maybe less, they'll complete their transformation and we'll have Devourers 2.0. Better to end it now." The Vec fleet was destroyed in minutes. Velkari watched in horror as escape pods were targeted and eliminated. No warnings, no survivors. "This is genocide," she whispered. "No," Chen corrected. "This is prevention. Every species that's tried to use devourer technology has eventually become like them. We're not going to let that cycle continue." Word of the Vec extinction spread through Council space. Some species were horrified. Others, particularly those who had lost worlds to the devourers, understood. The galaxy was learning that human mercy had very specific limits. The hunt continued. Human ships developed new technologies specifically for tracking devourers. They recruited bounty hunters from species that had suffered under devourer attacks. They established monitoring stations in deep space to detect any sign of devourer resurgence. 3 months later, human forces located what they had been searching for: the devourer origin world. Hidden in a pocket of folded space, the planet was a nightmare of biotechnology. Entire continents were covered in organic factories that could produce millions of devourer ships. Hibernation facilities held trillions of dormant drones. Data cores contained the accumulated knowledge of countless consumed civilizations. "It's beautiful, in a horrific way," one of the human scientists commented. "The perfect merger of biology and technology." "Glass it," Chen ordered. "Sir, the scientific value—" "I said glass it. Every bit of devourer technology is a potential infection vector. We're not risking contamination." What followed was destruction on a scale that made even hardened human soldiers pause. Planet cracker bombs that destabilized tectonic plates. Atmospheric incendiaries that turned the sky into flame. Biological weapons that consumed organic matter at a molecular level. It took 3 days to completely sterilize the devourer homeworld. When it was done, nothing remained but a ball of molten rock and ash. Human ships then destabilized the pocket dimension itself, ensuring no one could ever find even the ruins. "Overkill," Velkari muttered. "There's no such thing as overkill when it comes to existential threats," Chen replied. "There's only dead and not dead enough." As the campaign neared its end, the political situation in Council space grew complicated. Many species were grateful to humanity for ending the devourer threat. Others feared what humans might do next. A species capable of such thorough destruction with weapons that violated every concept of civilized warfare, was not something to take lightly. The Altarian delegation formally proposed new restrictions on human military development. The Korvax suggested establishing monitoring stations around Sol system. The Thraxians wanted humans to share all their weapon technologies to maintain balance. Admiral Chen's response to these proposals was broadcast to the entire council. For 50 years, we played by your rules. We limited ourselves, held back, pretended to be something we weren't. Then the Devourers came, and you begged us to be what we truly are. We answered that call. We bled for you, died for you, committed acts that go against your precious civilized values to keep you safe. He paused, letting the words sink in. And now you want to chain us again? Put us back in our box? Make us pretend that we're not the apex predators of a death world? No. The transmission showed Earth's true military might for the first time. Hidden shipyards in asteroid belts, weapon research facilities on moons. A fleet 3 times larger than what they had revealed. We'll honor our borders, we'll trade peacefully, we'll even share some technologies to help you defend yourselves. But we will never again pretend to be weak. We will never again hide what we are. The ultimatum was clear. Accept humanity as they were, or face the consequences. Valkyrie found herself in the unique position of mediating between humanity and the Council. She had spent more time with humans than any other diplomat, had seen them at their best and worst. They could conquer the galaxy if they wanted, the Altarian delegate said during one heated session. What's stopping them? The same thing that stopped them for 50 years, Valkyrie replied. They don't want to conquer. They want to survive and ensure others survive too. But they'll do it their way. Their way is monstrous. Their way works, Valkyrie countered. The Devourers are gone. Not beaten back, not contained, but gone. Forever. How many civilizations did we lose over the millennia because we were too civilized to do what was necessary? The final Devourer stronghold was discovered in a nebula at the galaxy's edge. It was less a military base and more a repository, containing genetic samples and data from every species the Devourers had consumed. Trillions of lives reduced to information storage. Human xenobiologists wanted to study it, to possibly restore some of the extinct species. Admiral Chen overruled them. It's a trap, he explained to Valkyrie. Maybe not an intentional one, but a trap nonetheless. Someone will look at that data and think they can use it better than the Devourers did. They'll try to resurrect something, improve it, control it, and the cycle will start again. But the knowledge of entire civilizations is how the Devourers stayed ahead of everyone for so long. They didn't just consume bodies, they consumed ideas, technologies, cultures. That knowledge base is what made them unstoppable. Chen's expression was grim. It all burns. The destruction of the repository was witnessed by representatives from every council species. Human ships surrounded the structure and deployed weapons that didn't just destroy but erased. Antimatter charges that annihilated matter at the subatomic level. Reality warpers that removed sections from existence itself. When it was done, not even atoms remained. With the last Devourer facility destroyed, Admiral Chen made a final broadcast. The Devourers are extinct. Every ship, every world, every hidden base, every genetic sample. They're gone. But let their fate serve as a warning. Humanity answered your call. We became the monsters you needed us to be. And we're very, very good at it. But we're not your monsters. We're not your weapons. We're your neighbors. Dangerous neighbors who will leave you alone as long as you leave us alone. But if another threat comes, if something else crawls out of the dark between the stars, remember what we did here. Remember that we're the species that looked at extinction and said, not today. We're the ones who turned a death world into a home and death itself into a tool. We're humanity. And we're still here. The transmission ended. Across the galaxy, species reacted in different ways. Some celebrated, some worried, all remembered. Valkyrie stood in the council chambers one last time before returning to her homeworld. The debates were still raging about how to handle humanity going forward. Some wanted alliance, some wanted containment, some wanted to pretend Earth didn't exist. "What do you think we should do?" the new council president asked her. Valkyrie thought of everything she had seen. The brutality, the efficiency, the complete lack of mercy toward threats, but also the protection, the sacrifice, the willingness to become monsters so others didn't have to. "We should be grateful," she said finally. "Grateful that when we needed Deathworlders, they answered. Grateful that they're willing to go back to being neighbors instead of conquerors. And we should pray to whatever powers we believe in that we never give them a reason to show us what they're truly capable of." She paused at the chamber doors, looking back one last time. "Because what they did to the Devourers, that was them being restrained. That was them fighting someone else's war with someone else's lives at stake. Imagine what they'd do if we threatened Earth directly." The council members shuddered at the thought. As Valkyrie's ship departed for home, she passed human vessels returning to Sol system. They had removed the weapons that violated council law, packed away the technologies that terrified civilized species. They were going back to pretending, at least on the surface. But everyone knew now. The mask had slipped. The galaxy had seen what lurked beneath humanity's civilized veneer. They had seen Deathworlders in their natural state, organized, focused, and utterly ruthless when threatened. The Devourers had been ancient, powerful, and seemingly unstoppable. They had consumed civilizations for millennia, adapted to every weapon, survived every attempt to stop them. They had lasted exactly 9 months against humanity. On Earth, in a small bar in what used to be called Montana, a group of veterans from the Devourer War raised their glasses in a toast. They had done terrible things, committed acts that would haunt their dreams, become the monsters that the galaxy needed. "To the Devourers," one soldier said, "they asked for a war." "And we gave them extinction," the others chorused. They drank in silence, each lost in their own thoughts. Tomorrow, they would return to being farmers, teachers, engineers. They would pretend to be civilized, peaceful, harmless, but they would remember. They would stay ready, because the galaxy was vast and full of threats, and somewhere out there, something else might make the mistake of threatening humanity or its allies. And when that day came, the Deathworlders would answer the call again. No warnings, no survivors, no mercy. Just humans being human. In the depths of space, automated human monitoring stations kept their endless vigil. They searched for any sign of Devourer resurgence, any hint of returning threat. They found nothing but the void. The Devourers were gone. Not defeated, not driven back, not contained. Extinct. And across the galaxy, every species that had witnessed the war remembered a simple truth. When you call upon monsters to save you, make sure you can live with what they do. Humanity had answered the call. They had saved the galaxy. Everyone just had to hope they never had to call again, because next time, the Deathworlders might not stop.